See, I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself already by saying we're already playoff bound after the draft that we're going to have. And you all thought we were going to finally play that big draft breakdown and it was going to make sense. But it still doesn't make sense because nothing makes sense on this show. I'm Jamie and I'm joined with Mark and JP from Overtime. We may have some other guests joining us later, but for now, welcome to the show. We are back. How you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. I think it's been a while. I can't even remember how these podcasts used to work, but we'll try and have some fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, I will open up the chat. So, I mean, obviously, I'm going to be completely honest. I don't really know a lot about the draft, so I'm just going to be listening to you talk, and hopefully, I'm just going to be like, just take a Florida Gator, and we'll be fine, right? But, yeah, the chat is open. If there's any questions that you do want to put on, we are live on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. So make sure you are watching. And yeah, JP, you were about to say something before I rudely interrupted you.
No, it's fine. I mean, to be honest, I'm going to come into this with some honesty. I've done draft research this year, but I haven't done as much as I normally would do because my team don't have a first round pick this year. And it's actually, I think, the first time since I started following the team that they haven't had a first round pick in draft time. So it's a bit of an odd one for me. We obviously give up 3 picks last year to get Trey Lance. There's, of course, all the chat around Debo. I think we'll probably discuss that a bit later on because it's more general league stuff. But, yeah, I think, as always, our man for the draft is our Geordie friend, Mark Steele, or the Geordie Preacher, or whatever fucking nickname he's got this week. I think there's a few storylines coming up. One of the biggest ones at the moment is there's a surprise name atop most mock drafts I've seen. I don't know if it still counts as a surprise. The chat has been going on for about a week, but Mark Travon Walker potentially at number 1 seems to be the current chatter. Is that a surprise to you? It certainly was to me.
It is when we look at mock drafts all the way from pre-Christmas, and Travon Walker wasn't even in the first round. I was just writing there a few topics what we can talk about because as normal we haven't planned anything. So top of the draft, top of the one, who'll be number 1? Who'll be number 1? You know, John, I don't know about you, but I've been following the NFL for a lot of years. And I don't remember number 1 being so hotly debated for a while like this. I mean, I think the last time I can think about genuinely who'll be number 1 was probably when Mario Williams and Reggie Bush were around, or maybe Eric Fisher. You know what I mean? Or when they were taken, you know, like normally you go into a draft and there's an idea of who's going, like Trevor Lawrence or, you know, like Myles Garrett. I mean, even if we go to when Baker Mayfield was drafted, it wasn't that much of a shock when he was taken, really. You know, we knew it was going to be a quarterback at least that the Cleveland Browns were going to take. And I think this year, like, we just don't have a clue. You know, we just don't have a clue who's going to be number 1. Now, if we look at the bookies, they've got Travon Walker as favourite now to go number 1. And then they've got Aiden Hutchinson, who's second favourite. And the only other player they've got who's, you know, in that bracket, I think he's 7-2, is Ike Ekwonu, which tells me that it's a 3-horse race. You know what I mean? No, it's a 3-horse race. And the truth of the matter is it really a 2-horse race? Because if it was going to be Hutchinson, he's been the consensus number 1 all the way through. They would have mentioned it by now.
Yeah, it would be him, wouldn't it?
I think it's not going to be Hutchinson. I think it's going to be either Travon Walker or Ike Ekwonu. It's the only ones that makes, like, you know, like at this moment in time. If it was going to be Hutchinson, John, they'd have said it.
Yeah, we know.
The first pick, they can see it whenever they want. You know what I mean? No, but I don't think it's going to be Hutchinson.
No, and there's no sense in bluffing the number 1 either because, like, nobody's going to take ahead of you. Okay, you might be looking for some trade or whatever, but, you know, in general, there's no sense in bluffing who your pick's going to be. It used to be that, we don't know if we can get a contract worked out with the number 1 pick because back then there was no rookie wage scale. That's the Mario Williams and Reggie Bush draft. That was actually the first draft I ever watched when Mario Williams went number 1. I think this this conversation speaks to something about this year's draft. It's not a bad draft, but there's no consensus top player in it. Last year, this time, we were talking about Trevor Lawrence, who most people have been waiting 2-3 years to see actually in the NFL. And then there was the intrigue around all the other quarterbacks. We haven't got that this year. There's no consensus top quarterback necessarily. There's a lot of debate around that. I think what we're seeing is a draft full of talent, but maybe not necessarily one can't miss player.
Do you know what you've got to remember as well, John? This is 2 drafts combined into one because of the COVID year. So it's deep. There's about 1,000 people who are draftable.
Mm-hmm.
It's deep because it's 2 classes combined into one because the COVID year, people had the option to defer. So what you've got is you've basically got twice the amount of people who are in the draft. And it's deep all the way through. I think that this boils down to one thing. Bulky. What does bulky like? You know what I mean, though? And
yeah,
the truth is when you look at the athletic testing of Hutchinson and Walker, it's actually not that much different.
No.
But when you look at the arm length between Hutchinson and Walker, that's where the difference stands up. One's got over 34 arms, the other one's got 31 arms. And Balky has a history of drafting people with long arm length, especially at the pass rush position. I'm thinking Alden Smith.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. I feel quite qualified to talk about Trent Baalke. He was my team's GM for, 6-7 years. There's 2 things that I know he likes: people coming off ACL injuries and people with long arms. And based on what we're seeing, I think Travon Walker, I can see why he likes Travon Walker. I could also easily see him going with going with an out there. Well, maybe he doesn't care what other people think. He doesn't care what the consensus is. He takes what he thinks is best. It worked for him very well in the first couple of years in San Francisco. It blew up on him late in his tenure in San Francisco. He's new. He's relatively new in Jacksonville. To a certain extent, is he on the hot seat? They had another bad season. There was the whole Urban Meyer debacle last year. I think he's probably feeling some pressure, but he is going to be true to what he believes is a good football player. As much as I am surprised to see Walker at the top of most people's mocks now, I'm not that surprised that it's Jacksonville that are considering doing it. It makes sense. It fits with what we've seen from him in the past.
I mean, I'm actually watching NFL Network as it's on in my living room here, and they were just doing a little screenplay there of Trayvon Walker as I was watching. And the guy's long, and he's very athletic, and he's got the frame to pack on weight. He can play. He's about 270 pounds at the moment. They reckon he could get up to 280 quite comfortably. His athletic testing was good. You're banking on production, though, because at college he had 5 sacks throughout his collegiate career. Now, people will look at his usage in Georgia and what he was asked to do then. You know what I mean? They're playing as part of that front 7. And the opportunity to rush the passer just wasn't there in that system. So they're looking and going, well, look, we know his productions wasn't there, but he wasn't put in a position for it to be there. If we think we can get this guy in a pinata yards back pass rush position, bank on these athletic traits, and think we're going to have I suppose if they're taking him number 1, they're hoping for a Hall of Fame career. Because that's what you want with a number 1 pick, You see him as a Hall of Fame type of player.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. You kind of, you're not drafting for a solid player. You're drafting for a superstar that changes your franchise around. And I think we've seen that borne out in previous number 1 picks. You think about Kyler Murray going number 1. Okay, Bosa went 2, but you're looking at it as this guy can turn our franchise around. This guy's the superstar who's going to change the face of the team.
I tell you what, we've talked about that pick enough, but there's a question here by Chris. Who goes number 2?
Yeah.
If Walker goes number 1, or if Ike Ekwonu goes number 1, it's only. I think it can only be one of them 2. Hutchinson number 2 is an easy pick. It's the easiest pick for the Detroit Lions to make. I
think it probably would be Hutchinson, which will probably please Bones. It's a shame he's not here. because he's been worried all year about him taking Thibodeau, I think, at 2, and potentially taking a QB or potentially taking a QB. I honestly think a bizarre number 1 pick is an ideal scenario for the Lions if it is Travon Walker.
They've got to be laughing. They get Hutchinson.
Yeah.
They get the guy who's a home state hero. They get the kid who's got the mentality that Dan Campbell wants. He's got the locker room presence that Dan Campbell wants. He's got the production that will appease the Lions fans. He had a very good season. Lions fans are going to be buzzing because, given the state of some of their picks over the years, it would seem that Hutchinson's a very safe bet for them.
You would think so, yeah. I think that's the word I would use. That's the word I would use to describe a lot of the top of this draft, to be honest. Safe. There are no... I keep coming back to this. There were no outright superstars, I don't think, at the top end. But there are a lot of picks that you wouldn't be unhappy if your team gets them. I don't think there's any that you're really taking a risk with here. I mean, Jacksonville, to a certain extent, are taking a risk not necessarily with the player, but just because of where they're drafting them. As you said, they're looking for a game changer, and I don't know that they're getting that if they're doing that. It's an interesting one. I think there's a lot going on this year. There's multiple storylines really coming out of it. What it does open up for the Lions is, yes, Hutchinson is the obvious pick, but it also means that potentially they're open for business at 2. They might trade down. That there was chatter that they wanted to, on the basis that Hutchinson will go number 1. If he doesn't, does that open up more options? Would they take that, or are they just going to be happy with what they've got? I wouldn't be shocked to see somebody leap up to 2. I think what's going to prevent a lot of trade-ups this year is possibly lack of an outstanding quarterback talent, at least one that you can be certain about. There are some, we'll talk about them in a little bit, I'm sure, but there are some that you could project as being good, good to great players, but I don't think there's anybody that you go, and we absolutely have to get up for this guy. So maybe that'll, punish the trade.
And it's a very deep class, like I said, what's the difference? If you pick in, for example, what's the difference between the 15th best player in this year's draft and the 35th best player in this year's draft? You know what I mean? Like, what's the difference between Devontae Wyatt and Jones?
Yeah.
You know what I mean, though? What's the difference between Nakobe Dean and Devin Lloyd and Leo Chanel or Troy Anderson or Chad Muma? You know what I mean, though? Like, that's the thing. It's lacking that top-end positional talent. I think the incentive for teams to trade up just isn't there this year. I think there's teams who want to trade down. Like the Carolina Panthers, I was talking about it offline. They're picking number 6. Their next pick is 132. They're picking number 6 because they're bad. And they've got a lot of holes. Their offensive line's a mess. They don't know who's playing quarterback. Who's going to man corner opposite JC Horn? They're lacking playmakers. They've got a few pieces on defense. Burns, Chin, Brown, Horn. But, it's sparse. And offensively, they don't know who's playing quarterback. They don't know who's going to be his blindside blocker. They don't know who's going to be playing guard. They've got Tyler Morton, who's a right tackle. They don't really have anything else. And they've got 2 picks in the top 150.
They've got McCaffrey, who's missing half of the season most of the time anyway.
Yeah, so they've got 2 players. They've got 2 picks, one at 6 and one at 132. How are you going to get a quarterback and a left tackle where you are there? They're going to want to trade back, and they're going to want to gather some picks. But how far can you trade back and still get Kenny Pickens, which I think is the guy they want?
It's an interesting one with him because I've seen him all over people's boards. I've seen him near the top. I've seen him near the middle. I've seen him out the first round on some. I don't know. I must admit, I watched him play, and I think he's a good quarterback, but good's about it. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's enough for some teams. I don't know.
Do you know what it is, John? Matt Rule recruited him when he was at college. He was committed to play for Matt Rule before he moved on from Baylor to Temple. So he's got that relationship with Matt Rule. So I think that's why they want to take him. Matt Rule's saving his job. You know what I mean? Let's face it. If he doesn't perform this year, he's out. You know what I mean? And I think
drafting a rookie QB can sometimes save your job for a couple of years because on the basis that, well, we need to let him develop, we need to see what he's about. So I could certainly see that.
I think Kenny Pickens is their guy, but it's clear they need more picks. If they ought to pick Kenny Pickens at 6 and put him behind that offensive line right off the air, because no one's blocking shit for him. He's getting hammered. You know what I mean? He's getting hammered. You know, Joe Tryon and all those pass rushers that are in that league. You know what I mean? I think of Cameron Jordan at the Saints. You know what I mean? I think, he's toast. He's toast if he goes in that situation. So what they need to do is they need to think, right, okay, we need to drop back from 6 and we need to get ourselves in range either in the first round or in the second round to be able to still get Kenny Pickett, but also get an offensive tackle or a good offensive lineman. Now, the Saints are obvious candidates to come up because they've got 2 picks in the teens. But do they want to give the ammo to their in-division rival? The next obvious team to come up is Kansas City, who are picking right at the back of the first round, but have 6 picks in the top 103 and don't have 6 holes. So they're going to be really aggressive and they're going to want to get up so they can have their pick of wide receivers. Because where they're picking at the moment and where the run of wide receivers is going to start, they could be left doing the Christian Watson dance. You know what I mean? Though? When really, I think they want to be in the Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave dance.
Yeah, that's an interesting storyline to watch, isn't it? There's a lot of, I think actually receiver bucks the trend a little bit of the rest of the draft. There's some very good ones at the top end, and then it kind of falls away quite quickly. So if you're a team picking at the back end of the first round, you start seeing like you said, like Kansas, you start seeing a run on receivers. Are you going to have to move up to? Are you going to have to move up to get one? Would you move up to get one? Who's the best receiver in the draft in your mind? There's a lot of conjecture about. I've seen Drake London. I've seen Garrett Wilson. People seem to move them around a lot. You know, even Traylon Burks has had a lot of hype, even though I think he's considered like the number 4 probably.
I know who the safest option is, if that makes sense. Chris Olave's the safest option. He can run all the routes. He can play inside, outside. Garrett Wilson is also a very well-polished wide receiver. He's got more upside than Olave, but he's a little bit lighter. Drake London is heavier and more your contested catch guy, but he's not going to be a vertical threat. You know what I mean? Then you've got Traylon Burks, who has played outside, not played a lot, is really looking like a slot receiver. You know what I mean? So and then you've got Jameson Williams, who's injured. You know,
that's a big question mark on Williams, isn't it? Now, I mean, it's interesting because I think what I'm getting from what you're saying there is it's scheme related. It's who fits best in your offense, probably to a certain extent, as to will define who you think the best receiver is.
I think we can rule out somebody like Williams for a team like the Kansas City Chiefs will want to trade up. Because they're in win now mode. And we know that Williams isn't going to come back until Thanksgiving, they reckon. So, you know, they want somebody who can get in and get in straight away because freeing up Travis Kelce depends on it. You know what I mean? When you haven't got Tyreek Hill on the field, teams can just key into Travis Kelce. You know what I mean? So they want somebody who can come in now, start straight away. Chris Olave makes more sense there. Jameson Williams makes more sense to a team who might be in a rebuild. For example, like the Jets. The Jets know they're not winning this year. They know they're not going to challenge for the playoffs. You know what I mean? So they're looking at it and going, well, we don't mind if he doesn't play until November because we're not ready to win anything anyway this year. We'll take him for 2023. You know what I mean? So there's an interesting scenario there around Jameson Williams is if he'd been fit, he probably would have been the first wide receiver off the board, but he's not. But depending on if the Jets take a swing, he still might be the first wide receiver off the board, despite the fact that he's going to not play football until like November.
Yeah, the Jets are an interesting team because obviously, they pick a few times in the first round. They've moved around a bit. They need to start building a team around Zach Wilson. there's talk of them potentially trading for Deebo Samuel, but it's not going to be for 4, and it probably isn't going to be for 10. So, I mean, they've a lot of needs, though. So is it? I don't know whether at that point I would be trading for a veteran player. I think I'd be saying, let's use the picks we've got and get as much young talent in as we can.
I think they're in a good position because I think if they're sitting at number 4 and we suspect that the board's going to go something like Trayvon Walker number 1, Aiden Hutchinson number 2, the Houston Texans are picking number 3. You know, the Jets might end up with Kayvon Thibodeau at number 4. And then at number 10, they're thinking, well, maybe we can either pick between Stingley or Gardner. Or we're not really that bothered. We'll take whatever one's left of the 2. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's... I think what you're seeing, and I know this is true of most... teams because you wouldn't be picking up here if you didn't. But I'm looking down to probably about Washington, Minnesota, and I'm going, these teams have a lot of needs. This isn't just a pick one player and fix everything kind of thing. You know, Ben's put in the chat the Jets need to find some more protection for Wilson to an extent, but they have invested quite heavily in the O-line. They've just had injuries. You know, it's not so much that they don't have the players, it's that the players haven't been on the field.
I have the question.
Sorry, Jim.
I was just going to say, you have that protection, talking about getting the protection for Wilson. When we were going into the draft last season, it was all talks for Penei Sewell going to the Bengals. He went for Jamar Chase, didn't get that protection, and he still made the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's a weird one with that, though, because you could argue they lost the Super Bowl because they lost the ability to protect Burrow late in the game. I know most teams will look at it and go, well, yeah, you got to take the top receiver or you got to take a playmaker, and there is some substance to that. The Jets are in a nice position where they could, in theory, take 2 because, you know, they could take a playmaker and an O-lineman because they got the pick at 4. They're probably going to have Evan Neal on the board at 4. Do they think Evan Neal helps them out? Maybe. And then at 10, do you go back and get playmaker? Did they trade down? I don't know. If there is somebody that wants to come up for one of those receivers, maybe a quarterback, you know, maybe one of the edges, because I mean, Thibodeau's still on the board here, and this was a guy that was early in the season was being mocked at number 1. I don't think you can look at him now.
He's been number 1 for the last 3 years since he came out of high school. He was a number 1 recruit. You know what I mean? This was a kid who came out of high school as a consensus number 1 recruit. And he's been like number 1.
Would love him.
He's been number 1 all the way through the process for like the last 2-3 years, John.
And then just drop back down.
And now in absolute, you know, like draft fucking as it is, we put these players under a microscope, you know, like, and people are asking him, you know, people are now starting to criticize his intention of football because he decides, and this is where it comes from, you know what I mean, John? This is where this comes from, right? People asked him why he chose Oregon as the number 1 recruit. And he said, I wanted to be in Oregon because it's where Nike was and I wanted to study how they built their brand. And people have then went, okay, then he's not interested in football. He's interested in building the Thibodeau brand. That means he's going to now drop out of number 1 because how committed is he? But yet, if you speak to his teammates, if you speak to the Oregon staff, all of them love him. They see he's more committed than anybody else. You know what I mean? So it's like, if I'm the Jets and Thibodeau's there, for me, it's like, and I think because Robert Saleh wants his pass rusher as well. You know, we think about what he had in San Francisco. He had Bosa, he had Buckner, you know what I mean? Or he had Armstead. He had talent on that defensive line, which he just hasn't got. I mean, he's got Quinnen Williams. But if you, all of a sudden, if you put Quinnen Williams alongside Thibodeau, you start to think, yeah, they're building something a bit Robert Saleh-like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and that's where I think if Thibodeau's there at 4, they'll take him.
I think there's a lot of reasoning for that. And interestingly, 2 of the guys you mentioned, Armstead and Buckner, both Oregon guys as well that played for him in San Francisco. I think Thibodeau is suffering from the set. okay, it didn't happen to Bosa quite as badly, but there was a lot of the talk around Bosa about, might he be injury prone? Might there be a problem with his attitude? Blah, blah, blah. Sometimes you just got to look at what's in front of you. The guy, there's a reason the guy was the number one recruit and at top of the most people's draft boards until about 2-3 months ago. The guy can play, and if he's at 4, I think it makes a lot of sense. There's an interesting one that I saw earlier that I wanted to bring up to you because I think you probably would have agreed with my response to it, but I just want to get your thoughts. But Flash from the group chat, fellow Geordie, I believe, said that asked the question: if you were to pick between 2 equal prospects at a spot between safety and corner, which are you going with? Now, to me, this is a no-brainer answer. It's corner. But
yeah, I'm taking corner.
I just wanted to ask you, and the reason I think it's come up is Kyle Hamilton, because he's very high up most boards that I've seen, and he's a position that's not traditionally that highly valued in safety. Where's he going to end up, Kyle Hamilton? Because I've seen him mocked everywhere from 2 to like 22. So
the usage of them, John. It's usage of them. If you've got a coach thinking enough to see that this guy isn't just a safety, and think, right, okay, this is a guy I can use as a chess piece. I can put him over nickel. I can put him in the box. I can lie. I can put him deep third. If there's a tight end that needs taken out one particular game, I can have him come to the tight end. If there's a game where we're able to rush a safety, I'll use him as a rush safety. If we need a nickel, I'll put him. If somebody's forward thinking enough to go, what can he be this week, and have him play with several different hats, then he's totally a high prospect. If somebody just wants to use him as a traditional safety, then of course positional value is a problem. Yeah. We've seen these type of players drop though, John. We saw Derwin James drop, into the teens. You know what I mean though? And Kyle Hamilton might be one of those where at the end of the night, he's picked outside of the top 10. And we look back in 2 or 3 years' time and think, well, why has that happened? You know?
Yeah. I think people, to a certain extent, they place too much value on positions. I think it's always that ongoing battle. I think Gaz has mentioned it in the chat. Take the best player on the board and make it work. I sort of agree with that, but it's like you said, you need the creativity to be able to do that. I actually think he'd make a great Jet. I think Salah would find something to do with him. He's not going to take him at 4, but if he's there at 10, they might think about it. I think he's a top class player. It's just he's playing at a position that isn't traditionally valued. But there's an argument that it doesn't really matter in today's NFL. If you're a good enough DB, you're going to be on the field most of the time anyway. Somebody like Hamilton, in theory, you could probably move him down to the slot and he'd probably do okay. These are things that they always say you shouldn't take projections in the first round, and I get that. But then sometimes you got to look at a real talent and go, yeah, you know what? We can take the risk on him. We can find a role for him. I've seen him mocked at 11 on the latest mock I've just looked at going to Washington. Should be interesting. I think that's a position they're sorely lacking in. Some playmakers on the back end of the defense. Certainly, they seem to have the front 7 from last year, but they didn't have much behind it.
Do you know what's weird about this year's draft? You can have this argument about every single position apart from safety. Safety is the only position this year where you have got a clear front runner, and that is Hamilton. Every other position down this draft, you're looking down and you're going, who's the best D tackle? Is it Wyatt? Is it Davis? Edge. Who's the first edge to go? Is it Hutchinson? Is it Walker? Is it Thibodeau? You know what I mean? No, there's question mark. Who's the best linebacker? Is it Kobe Dean? Is it Devin Lloyd? Who's the best cornerback? Is it Sauce Gardner or is it Stingley? And then you go for a wide receiver. We've already discussed that. Who's the best wide receiver? Who's the best running back? Is it, and you go through every position and there's not a consensus, but yet you come to safety and the gulf between Hamilton and the next guy is about 30 picks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, Hamilton is, I would think, is comfortably going to be the only safety in round 1. I'd be surprised if there's another, unless they sneak on at the back end.
There's a few who I think could sneak in there. There's a few. Dax Hill, I think, might be number 2 at this moment in time, because he's got that corner safety versatility. Do you know, like like it's funny because I wrote a few things down here. One of them was Ike Ekwonu versus Evan Neal. Who's going to go first between them two? The next one is Charles Cross and Penning, and I've put Beware. You know what I mean? I've put Beware. You know, Charles Cross has had a lot of pass blocking sets, you know, coming out of Mississippi State in Leach's offense, you know, where he's asked to pass protect fucking loads of the times. But we saw Andre Dillard come out with the same, you know, like out the same pass. And yet he went to the Eagles and has looked dreadful. You know what I mean, though? Yeah. So that's enough for me to go Charles Cross. That's a fucking question mark. Then on the other side, you've got Trevor Penning, who looks a brute, but he's playing FCS. Like, you know, like quality. And then when you look at his pass blocking reps, actually pretty dicey. You know what I mean? Though? So I'm a little bit like, I feel good about Ike Ekwonu and I feel good about Evan Neal. I feel less good about Cross and Penning. You know what I mean? Though? I feel better about someone like Tyler Smith. You know, like at the back end of the round. You know what I mean? Though? The kid from Tulsa who's young, who's just a brute in the run game. I've never really seen him in the past game, so I guess he's like I guess he's got, you know, like but he's 21. He's 21. He's a blank canvas. You can teach him. You know what I mean, though?
Yeah.
Trevor Penning's a senior.
Last year, isn't it?
We all know how hard it is to teach seniors. I'm a Raiders fan. Leatherwood was a senior. I know how freaking hard it was to teach him. You know, it's when you play that much football and you've got bad habits, it's bad to coach them out. Trevor Penning, you know, he isn't great in pass blocking sets. He's just not. If you go watch his tape in pass blocking sets, he struggles in them. In third and long situations, he gets grabby. You know what I mean, though? So Trevor Penning, for me, is one of those who I think could be a bit of a bust.
Yeah. Time was you could probably hide someone like that, maybe at right tackle or something. The NFL doesn't work like that anymore. I don't think you could do that now. You need pass protectors on both sides now, just because of the way defenses have kind of evolved to put rushers. You know, kind of you get some teams that bring out, you know, like the NASCAR package. They bring on 4 rushers. You need proper pass protectors almost at every position on the O line now, even interior line. We've seen how interior pressure can destroy a team's offense. I'm acutely aware of that as a Niners fan. We have Aaron Donald coming at us, you know, twice a year, or in this year's case, 3 times a year. You know, it's part of the game now. I think you kind of have to accept that as what it is. Just talk to me quickly about Evan Neal. This was a guy that I was seeing mocked number 1 at one stage. How I'm seeing him at 6 on the PFF board. I'm seeing him top 10 on other boards. What are people not sure about with Evan Neal? What is it?
Lack of reps at left tackle. That's what it is. He played everywhere across the line at Alabama because Alabama, you know, like as the way they work, they've always got a senior who will step in there. You know what I mean? Or like Leatherwood kept him out at left tackle, even though Evan Neal's a better prospect. They don't necessarily play the better prospects at the better positions because part of their recruitment drive is to commit to giving players time. You know what I mean? And he just hasn't played that much left tackle, John.
Right. So it's more of an experience thing than anything blaring about his game.
Also, as well, I think he suffers from the Kayvon Thibodeau thing of he's been that good for that long that people forget. Whereas Ike Ekwonu improved dramatically in his last year, especially in pass blocking, and that's what people remember. You know what I mean? They remember this guy who's made a jump as opposed to this one who's been steady for ages, you know?
Do you think there's an element of doing that too much in the draft? We see people rise all the time late in the process.
We overthink things. I think GMs overthink things, and I think us as look. When all's said and done, you know, like I think Evan Neal will be a top 10 pick. You know what I mean, though. But I do think, for me, I mean, Ike Ekwonu watching his tape, look, this kid's physical, like, you know what I mean? If you want to watch some bully boy tape, go find some Ike Ekwonu tape. He's just battering people, like, you know, especially in the run game. You know, like, but yeah, Evan Neal's one of the, I'll tell you what, that brings us on to a nice little topic that I was going to talk about. High floor players who would think aren't missed players. And Evan Neal for me is one of those. He's a can't miss player. He'll either come in and be a good left tackle, or he'll be a very good right tackle, or he'll be a fucking Pro Bowl guard. He's got that because he's played those positions already. And for me, that's a high floor player. Another one is Zion Johnson, the kid out of Boston College. You know, like he's a guard. He played a little bit of left tackle. He reminds me of Kalichi Osemele. You know what I mean? He's got that tackle guard versatility. But at the very worst, you're getting a fucking really good left guard who's going to be in the NFL for 10 years. He's another high floor player. There's a few of those. There's a few of those that I like in there. George Karlaftis, I think, is another high floor player. At the very worst, you know, like you're going to be getting like a 6 to 8 sack a season guy, but he's got the potential to get double figures. You know what I mean?
Those are those classic sort of mid to late first round that aren't as hyped as, say, your top 5, your top 10. But if you get, I think you said it before, if you get 2 contracts out of them, you've done well. And I think those are those sort of guys. You know, looking at Johnson, for instance, Johnson to me is like one of those players that will go somewhere, probably start for 10 years. And yeah, he might never ascend to like superstar level, but he's a guard. He's not going to ascend to superstar level anyway. You just want a solid player there. And if you're picking late in the first, and you've got a pretty solid team, and you're looking at it and going, okay, what can we do here? What can we solidify? I think you take that every day. You know, I think this is the thing. I think what you're seeing now is in the top 5 to 10, teams are taking swings at players because they need a superstar, whereas lower down in the draft, sometimes you get the better picks, you know, because they're just going, these guys are solid football players. We don't need to wow anyone with this pick. We just need to make sure that we get, that we get the right person in. And it works, you know, and I think there's a tendency sometimes to like be too obsessed with getting a high pick instead of just getting the right people in. Let's just quickly pivot. I want to ask you about this because I think you spoke up pretty highly for him in one of the chats. It was a while ago, so I don't know if your opinion shifted. Talk to me about Malik Willis. I believe you were a pretty big fan of his, or you were projected him quite highly from where I was sitting.
The reason why is in a quarterback class of questions, pick the guy who can do the most. You know what I mean? For example, I think if you pick a quarterback who can rush, the floor's high anyway. Look at Jalen Hurts and what he was able to do with the Eagles. Not the most polished quarterback, but he's good with his feet, and you can win games on that, and you can get into the playoffs. And that's what it is with Malik Willis. You know what I mean? There's enough question marks at every single quarterback in this draft. But if I'm picking one, I'm picking either Malik Willis, or if I'm later, I'm picking Desmond Ridder, because they can both run the ball. And even if they take a while to settle that arm down and find that accuracy, I'll still win games with them running 80 to 120 yards a game. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm pretty high on Malik Willis. It's not necessarily that I think his skill set is brilliant. I just think that there's enough question marks about everybody at quarterback this year. I want to pick the one who can win his games, and I think you can win games with Malik Willis.
It's a fair answer. Yeah, you were very you were pretty high on him. I think your view is shared by a lot of people. To be honest, I'm seeing him come up boards late. Overall, do you think this quarterback class is one of the weakest in a while? It looks it on paper.
Do you know, is it because there's not a 5-star recruit there, John? Mm-hmm. You know, like there's not a collegiate consensus, you know, like big recruit there, like Tua or Trevor Lawrence, or like next year where you got Stroud and Bryce Young. These guys were like 5-star recruits. These guys were big players coming out of high school into college. You know, Kenny Pickett's what, a 2-star, 3-star recruit. Malik Willis was, I think, a 4-star when he went to Auburn, failed at Auburn, ended up at Liberty. You know what I mean? Then you've got like Matt Corral, 4-star recruit. Then you go to Desmond Ridder, 3-star recruit. You know what I mean? And you're looking around and there's That's what it is. You know what I mean? Like they're not necessarily bad quarterbacks. They're just not the superstars that have come out of recent years. They're not the name. They're not the household names that have come out of recent years. Do I think there'll be a very good quarterback to come out of this class? Yes. Do I think that one of these quarterbacks will make a Pro Bowl at some point in his career? Well, yes, because Mitch Trubisky did. You know what I mean? Do I know which one it will be? No. If I'm banking on which one it'll be, I'm saying it's going to be Malik Willis because he can run.
It's a good shout. I think there's some interesting fits for Willis if he goes in the first round. The one that just popped into my head was Seattle, looking for a QB. It's that skill set they've obviously liked in the past. I don't know whether they'd take him at 9, having said that, but it's something that it just popped into my head.
John, because I think if he falls to Pittsburgh, I think they'll take him.
That's an interesting fit. I hadn't really thought of that one.
I think if he falls to number 20, Pittsburgh are going to take him. So they're meant to be enamored with him. You know, like when it was his pro day, Mike Tomlin spent ages with him, apparently. When he was at the Combine, he spent a lot of time with the Pittsburgh scouts. And Pittsburgh don't really play a lot of smoke and mirrors. They kind of just go for who falls to them and who presents good value. I think if he's there at 20, Pittsburgh will take him. So I think if Seattle want to take him, they're going to have to take him at 9.
Interesting. Well, maybe I've just thrown a prediction out there then. Get your bets on, guys. Ben Jones asked in the chat, sorry, Jamie, I think you were going to do that, but I just noticed you put it on screen. Do you believe in the theory of you don't start a rebuild with a quarterback?
No. I'm of the theory of you start a rebuild with a quarterback if there's one there.
I don't know if I would say that particular sentence, but I think I would say until you've got a quarterback, you haven't got anything.
Yeah, look at the Jacksonville Jags. The Jacksonville Jags were in rebuild yesterday, last year, last fucking 3 years, but they still took Trevor Lawrence. And of course, you still take it. If the talent's there, you take it. I think if they'd done the draft again, I think if they'd done it 100 times, they'd still pick Trevor Lawrence. I would still pick Trevor Lawrence. You know what I mean? You know, if give it a million times, I'll pick Trevor Lawrence in any scenario. You know what I mean? Because them players come up rare. I think if it was this year, would I start a rebuild with a quarterback? No, definitely not. Definitely not. There's just not the talent.
Yeah, I think that's a fair answer. It depends what's in front of you, doesn't it? But I think you're always looking for a quarterback, even if you're not necessarily getting one in the draft. You're always looking for one somehow. You know, you look at teams that have acquired quarterbacks in the last few years. Thinking of Denver acquired Wilson in the offseason because it was the piece that was missing. They built a decent team without a QB, so I think there's an argument to it, but I think you're always looking. It's just if things fall the way you want them to fall. There's
a reason why quarterbacks are the highest paid position in the NFL. Because they're the most important one. You know, and if you get one, you're in the haves and have-nots. And I think this question might come about a bit more because we saw Matthew Stafford just win the Super Bowl, and he's not necessarily a top 10 quarterback. You know what I mean? But ultimately, I mean, if you're going to get one, you're going to want to get somebody of that. You know what I mean? That's what people, if there's one on offer, you're going to take one, you know?
Yeah, it's a shame Bones wasn't here to respond to that one live. I've just realised
he's probably typing now.
I've just realised it's obviously him asking the questions in the chat. I've been calling him Bones for so long, I forgot what his bloody name was. Sorry, Bones. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some, I know I really don't want to get into the Stafford as a QB debate again, but there is definitely some value to that. If you've got one that's good enough to make the throws at crunch time, you don't need to be spending money on a superstar necessarily, you know?
Look, I think I subscribe to pretty much continually, you know, like how the board falls take it. You know, like there's a reason why the Baltimore Ravens over the last 15 years, I would say, have always been there or thereabouts. It's because the take as the board falls. You know what I mean?
That's not where the argument comes in. If they're the most expensive, surely you want them on their rookie deal when you already have a good team to support them. I mean, it's hard to get a good team without a QB, though. Like, we always hear talk about these bridge quarterbacks that, oh, yeah, they'll keep you running until you get a proper QB, essentially, is what it is. That's kind of what the Lions are doing now with Jared Goff, for instance. But you are going to hit a certain ceiling, and there's a point where you have to go, right, we need to get our QB now. I'd argue that's what the Rams have done. Like they kept butting their heads against, playoff defeats, and then, occasionally missing the playoffs, and it was like, right, we need someone better now. We can't go on with Jared Goff. We need to get somebody in. And I think that's probably, there's definitely the argument for having a guy on a rookie deal when you've got a good team around them. That's what I think we're doing with Trey Lance. We're going to try and keep our best players, and then we're going to get maybe 2-3 years out of Lance on a rookie deal and see how far he can take us. But I don't think that's necessarily the right way to do it. It's just the way that your team works out. It's different for every team. This is the other thing. Around draft time, we always hear talk about the best way to draft and what you should do and what you should do with certain positions. But the fact is, it's what works for you. And it's hard to judge these things until you're 2-3 years down the line as well. So beware of instant reactions on draft night.
The draft is fucking a crapshoot. Let's face it. It's now a media fucking circus of a crapshoot, but it's still a crapshoot. You've got all these experts, of which me and you are playing today, John, thinking that we know something better off whatever 5 minutes of tape we've watched on YouTube or fucking ESPN. You know what I mean, though? And the truth of the matter is much of it's the situation you land in. Much of it's the coaching setup you land in. Some of it breaks down to just sheer fucking luck. You know what I mean, though? And largely it's a crapshoot. It's a fucking crapshoot. You know what I mean, though? Like, we've all seen can't miss prospects like Robert Gallery. You know what I mean, though? Turn out to be rubbish. Like when Robert Gallery went number 2 for the Raiders, he was a can't miss prospect. Everybody said he's going to be, he's going to be a Hall of Fame outside tackle. The lad had to move into guard and bounced around the league a load. You know what I mean? And look, it's a lot of it's a crapshoot. You know what I mean? A lot of it's a crapshoot. A lot of it's fucking luck and situation and who goes in and who's there. Like it's a crapshoot, especially outside the top 3 picks.
I think the problem that you have as well some of the time is that the consensus top players are going to the worst organisations, because if they weren't bad organisations, they wouldn't be near the top, would they?
Would Aaron Rodgers have been Aaron Rodgers had he fell anywhere else at Green Bay and didn't get to sit behind Brett Favre, didn't get to go into a winning franchise? If he hadn't fell down the board to where he fell to and got picked up by an already good franchise in an already winning position, say if he had went top 10, you know what I mean, to a team that was struggling, would Aaron Rodgers be Aaron Rodgers? Well, we don't know, because it's hypothetical. You know what I mean?
It's hypothetical, but no, I don't think he would have been. And you've hit on a good point there. I remember talking about it in the run-up to the Niners-Packers playoff game. There's an alternate universe where Rodgers goes number 1 and Smith goes to the Packers, and they might have had opposite careers. We don't know that would have necessarily happened, but this idea that the 49ers made a mistake not drafting Rodgers is bullshit. Like, there was a split, and I remember this because it was one of the first drafts I paid attention to because my team had the top pick. There was a split between who was better, Smith or Rodgers. If you make the wrong choice, it's remembered for years. Don't get me wrong, but it hits exactly what you've just said. It hits on exactly what you just said. The organization you go to, the scheme you land in, everything matters. And Smith landed with Mike Nolan, who was a fucking idiot, and an offensive scheme that was terrible. Rodgers gets to sit behind Brett Favre for 3 years and then gets to play. There's a big difference there in terms of how you develop. Now, you can make the argument over, and I think probably less then than now. Now we talk about putting rookie QBs in early, letting them get game experience. In 2005, that wasn't really a thing. You would give, generally speaking, you would give them time to learn the game, get acclimatized to whatever. Rodgers went into a very good situation. It worked exactly the way it needed to for him. And I think, you know, what you've said there is spot on. There are so many good players here, but if they land at the wrong team or they land at a team in flux, I worry about anyone going to, say, for example, Carolina, because everybody knows everybody's job's on the line in Carolina. You might not be flavour of the month next year. You think about somebody like, okay, I know he's not made the best of his career, but you think about somebody like Josh Rosen, who goes number 9 overall one year and then he's being traded the next year because the whole organisation's changed in the meantime. These are just things that you can't really legislate for. You know, that's the difficulty.
I think you know, like when we go back to it, there's players in this draft that if your franchise calls their name, you're going to be very pleased with. We've already said Zion Johnson. We've already said Kyle Hamilton. If someone, Chris Olave, if your franchise picks and you hear the name Chris Olave, you can think fantastic. You know what I mean? The kick and run routes, he can play outside, inside. He's a deep threat. Yeah, great. He might not ever be wide receiver number 1 for his team. Like Garrett Wilson might be wide receiver number 1 for his team if he hits the ceiling. But you know, in Chris Olave, at the very, very worst, you've got a great number 2 wide receiver. Zion Johnson, if you draft him, you know you've got a 10-year guard. Kyle Hamilton, you know you've got a safety who's going to see his second contract. I'd say that there's other players who are like that. I think Devin Lloyd, the linebacker out of Utah, even though he's a 24-year-old rookie, just on his blitz potential alone, if you hear his name picked for your team, you've got to clap your hands and you've got to go, and I'm happy with that. You know what I mean? Sauce Gardner, he's another one. You know he's going to be a good corner. Yeah, he might never have the ball production that like Jalen Ramsey or Darrell Revis had, where he'll take the ball away a lot. But you know he's going to be a good corner who's going to stand up in the NFL because he's been so tested in man at Cincinnati. You know what I mean? There's players further down the draft who I like, John. There's a kid out of Wake Forest called Zach Tom, who I love. He played left tackle for Wake Forest. He had a pass blocking grade of 92. You know, now when you look at his athletic testing, he was in the 90th percentile for everything. He was in the 90th percentile for everything. That's good. That's like, you know, like that's in the top. You know what I mean? The reason why he might fall is he's not being talked about as a first rounder is because he's got short arms and he's 304 pounds at 6'4". Probably won't hold up at left tackle in the NFL. Might be a right tackle, but at the very least, you're going to get a good guard. If you're in round 3 and you hear your team has selected Zach Tom, be fucking happy about it. He'll be a 10-year NFL player. You know what I mean, though? Like, there's players there who I think are no-miss players. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just solid players. I think that's it. You've talked about it before, and I think we talked about it on last year's podcast about the kind of things you should be looking for at certain points in the draft. And I think if you're second and third round and you're getting a solid pro, you've done a good job. You know,
yeah, well, I'm thinking the Raiders, if they stay where they are, they're going to be picking number 86. If we pick up Zach Tom, I'm clapping my hands. I'm pleased. If we pick up Cole Strange, I'm clapping my hands. I'm pleased. They're strong players who'll play on the inside of the offensive line. And when you pick it in the third round, you know what I mean? Though, just get somebody who contributes. You know, if we hit on a player if we draft out of our 5 picks, 1 automatic contributor and 1 who's a role player, I'm buzzing. You know, like, go get Zach Tom. Go get Cole Strange. You know what I mean? Go. You know, if Leo Chanel's there, go get him. His blitz potential alone is gonna give him a job to do on the field. You know what I mean? People will say he's not good in coverage. I'm like, I don't care in the third round. Just give him a role. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's it. It's nice if you hit on a superstar accidentally in the mid to late rounds. But to be honest, you're just looking for people to fill the roster out.
Do you know what it is, really? When we think about it, John, what makes a good draft class? When we look at the best draft classes and we think, okay, then let's have a look at the Saints. You know what I mean? Who've got 3 starters. You know, or let's look at the Raiders when they got Mack and Carr. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, like people talk about them being great draft classes and stuff like that. Look, a good draft class really is if you find an automatic contributor, if you find 2 bit part players, you know what I mean, and you find a surprise. That's what a good draft class really is. You know what I mean? If you can have 2 players hit a second contract, and get signed into a second contract, you've got yourself a good draft class.
Yeah. What you can't have is a draft class of misses, and that's happened to a lot of teams where nobody's stuck or nobody's found a role, because that impacts you for a long, long time. You then need to find players to fill that. That fills your cap up. Then
James has just put, it's just been reported on Twitter that the Chiefs have been talking to teams from the 7th pick and down. I told you that. I said the Chiefs will be aggressive. They've got 6 picks in the top 100. They haven't got 6 holes. They'll want to get as high as possible to get the first wide receiver because they don't want to do the Christian Watson dance.
No, if they are talking 7 and down, the first team they're talking to is New York, and New York, as in the New York Giants. They have so many holes to fill. I would be taking every pick that was offered to me if I'm
the New York Giants. I could think, mate, I could trade my first pick, and I've still got one later on in the top 10.
Yeah, exactly. They're in a really good position. If it wasn't for the fact that it's the Giants and they'll somehow make a twat of it anyway, I'd say they're in a really good position. But having said that, new people in charge, maybe they'll turn it around.
I do think if there's a team that'll come up a long way, I do believe it'll be Kansas. I've said that before, and I think that'll be it. If there's the Panthers will want to trade back, but trading that far back's too far for them. They'll be out of the reach of the good offensive tackles, and they'll be out of the reach of Kenny Pickett, I think, who they'll want to get. I think they'll want to trade back, though, because they've got fucking nothing. They've got no draft capital. They picked number 6 and 132. That's their next pick. They're in right mess. I think that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to want to get up, and they're going to want to get up to pick the first wide receiver. They want their pick of who they want. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they definitely do, and you can see why, because every team around them, before they would pick at the normal spot, is a competitor and is also probably looking for something similar. You look at Dallas.
Here's one for you. I'm convinced that George Pickens is going to go around 1 now, by the way. I'm convinced. This is how convinced I am, and I'm going to see it. I'm going to say that George Pickens goes before Treylon Burks.
That would be interesting.
I'm convinced that George Pickens is going around 1. You're talking about a kid who, before his injury, people were talking about going in the top 10. You know what I mean, though? And he stayed at Georgia, where he was never going to get the catches because they're a run-first offense. But the kid was well thought of before that Achilles injury. You know what I mean, though? And he's back now and he's fit. And I'm convinced that George Pickens is going to go around 1. I'm convinced that he's going to go before Treylon Burks. Jamie, write it down. Mark said...
Well, we're going to clip this. We're going to clip it. Don't you worry. So.
Mark said George Pickens will go off the board before Treylon Burks.
On night 1?
I'm telling you, I'm convinced George Pickens will be a first-round wide receiver.
Yeah, that'll be a night 1.
And I'm convinced he'll go off the board before Treylon Burks.
But don't worry, we'll clip this and it'll be on Twitter on Friday after night 1 when it happens.
I'm convinced. And I think that I'll see him. I think if I was going to have a stab at a team who'll take George Pickens, I think he'll end up in Arizona.
That's an interesting one because they do definitely need somebody. That's that seems like a good fit to me. I think I'm going to go. Well, if we're making predictions, I'm sticking with Willis to Seattle. I think that's one of the best things to come off the top of my brain during this.
Oh well, I mean, if I'm going for shock value, and I think George pick another shock one is I think Stingley will be taken before Ahmed Gardner.
I've seen that on some mocks. To be fair, I agree with it.
I think when the dust settles, Stingley will still be the first corner off the board.
Where to, do you think?
Well, I'm thinking that Thibodeau has a very real chance of still being on the board when the Jets pick at 4. So I think that the Jets will pass on Gardner, and he's the most likely one. The Jets were the most likely candidate to take Gardner because of the scheme fit with what Salah
played.
The
man. Yeah.
And I'm thinking if he falls past the Jets at 4, I'm looking around and I'm thinking, yeah, Stingley will go before him.
I agree because there aren't actually many teams in the league that are looking for man-to-man corners. There are some, But I think on balance, yeah, you're probably right. There's more teams likely to take a Stingley than Why is Stingley not consensus top corner?
Because he's
Is it
been
Joey
shite the last
T?
2 years.
Is
But
it
the truth of the
right?
matter is, he's had his eye on the draft. I wouldn't want to play for LSU the last 2 years when I'm like an 500 season. Would you want to put your body on the line when you're potentially going to make about 40 odd million? You know what I mean? And you've got a history of injuries.
Yeah, I mean that's it. You've seen that with a few players as well, aren't you? Where I think they get devalued because they go, "Oh, they didn't have a good last 2 seasons." It's like, well, okay, but like you say, some players have got their eye on the draft. Lawrence didn't have a brilliant season coming out last year, but there was no doubt where he was going to go. You know, like
going to go number one. One he cares about
exactly.
You know,
Once you know where once you know you're a top 10 pick, I don't. You know, there's a lot of players that won't put the body on the line anymore, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's
do you
just
want
the way
another
that.
shock? Do you want another shock that I've got?
Go on.
He's
then.
the he's turning into the shock master here.
I'm going to turn into the shock master. I think that there will not be more than one linebacker taken in round one.
That seems like if you're talking pure linebackers, I think that might be a good shout.
When you think about it, there's like, and this is another shock that I've got. I think that if there is a linebacker who is taken in round one, I don't think it's going to be Devin Lloyd. I don't think it's going to be Nakobe Dean. I think it's going to be Quay Walker.
Okay, that's an interesting one. I haven't seen many people with that one. So
I think Quay Walker is going to be taken ahead of Nakobe Dean.
it's an interesting shout, that one. I must admit. There's some who's going to blow the draft up this year. There's always somebody that does something that no one was expecting that changes the whole thing. It's usually the Raiders, but you've actually got sensible people in charge now, so maybe you won't do it this year.
Who's going to blow the draft up? I think that Atlanta are the question mark. I think that's where the first crazy pick could happen. Number 8 with Atlanta.
They have a lot of issues. Like, they have a lot of needs on that team.
That's where I think we could start Crazyville. If I'm thinking the first pick that makes us go, what the fuck? I think Atlanta at number 8 have got the power to be that one. And I think it might be Malik Willis.
Interesting. Now that would be a story. I think I could see them doing that, definitely.
Marcus Mariota. They've moved on from Matt Ryan. I think you can win games with Mariota. I just think that Malik Willis will be a good. I think Malik Willis might be in their sights there.
What was the first major oh my god pick last year? Was it Leatherwood? Because I'm just looking again now, and I think most of these people we had quite high up. There's nobody that was a massive shot. Maybe Fields going as far as Chicago, but I don't think we had a what the fuck reaction to anything until Leatherwood, and then we had.
Yeah, I think Leatherwood was the first what the fuck reaction like.
I think that probably answers Gaz's question as well, because he's very early on in the chat. He put who was the biggest bust from last year, and who was the biggest plus. Surely
well, I mean, it's hard to judge players on 1 year. You know what I mean? First of all, Leatherwood played a lot of snaps. I've been saying this. I don't think he's a bust. He's played a lot of snaps. I don't think he's ever going to be Pro Bowl material, but he played a lot of snaps, and he's only going to get better for that. If I'm looking at who was a bust at this moment in time, I'm thinking, Christ, who didn't play much at all? Like Caleb Ford, Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, it didn't really work out, did it? I think he's got the talent to turn it around, obviously, but there were questions going in. They took a bit of a risk, but it hasn't worked as yet. Yeah, I mean, it's Kadarius Toney is arguably up there, not necessarily because he's done anything wrong as such, but they're already talking about potentially trading him. Maybe that's what we should talk about next. Actually, there's a lot of as there tends to be a draft week, there's a lot of trade rumors knocking about, and my camera is also.
I think lots of teams want to trade down, but I just don't. I think everybody wants to trade down this year because it's such a deep class. I just don't think there's many teams that want to trade up. I think bar Kansas, maybe Green Bay, I think you could see Kansas and Green Bay vying to get a choice of wide receiver. You know what I mean? Green Bay's got 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and you'll argue, do they need it? And Kansas, like we said, we've got 6 picks in the top 103. They definitely don't need that. So Kansas and Green Bay could be candidates to move up.
There's also some chatter around potential trades of veteran players going into the draft as well. I think the 2 highest up, well, possibly 3, but I haven't seen any trade rumours around them. And maybe this is because it's centred on my team, but 3 players I've seen linked with potential trades: Deebo Samuel, Kadarius Toney, and Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, I don't think there's going to be any trade for Garoppolo draft weekend because he's not healthy. I can't see that happening. Let's talk Toney first. Deebo's a bigger subject, probably. Let's talk Kadarius Toney. Are they trading him? Is that just a random rumor? Do we think that's happening, or what's happening there? And if it is, where are the best fits for him?
Oh, Kadarius Toney. Well, what's he going to get back in return? 3rd?
Probably at best, I would say, having been a first-round pick last year.
John, if it was me, and if I was you guys, I would just spend the 3rd on Kadarius Toney. Because when you look at what Toney and Deebo do, are they that dissimilar?
Obviously,
production-wise, they're very dissimilar, but skill set-wise, are they that dissimilar?
Probably not. No, I think if you look how Florida used Kadarius Toney versus how we used Deebo Samuel, there are some similarities. I think there are questions over Toney in terms of his attitude. Obviously, there's a reason the Giants want rid after a year. There's something not quite right there.
James is putting Deebo at the Jets, but it's too rich. It's too rich.
You're not going
to put a 4th on Deebo, and you're not going to spend a 10th. When are they picking next 10th?
They got 4 and 10.
He's not worth a 10th.
I mean, I think it's fairly common knowledge to anybody that's ever watched this podcast that Deebo Samuel is one of my favourite players on the 49ers. So I'll repeat what I said to you, Mark, when the news came out last week that I don't know if he's demanded or requested a trade. I'm not sure what state it's currently in. Football's football. If he doesn't want to play for the 49ers, fair enough. I think they have to look to maximise the return at this point. We were talking about it last night. He's out of contract at the end of the season. We're not going to franchise him because it will cost far too much money. He is important, but he's become important because of the scheme that he's in. He's not.
Thank you. He doesn't want to play that running back wide receiver position. He wants to just play wide receiver. I'm going to let you into a secret. He led the NFL drops. He led the NFL in drops last year.
Yeah, he did.
He's not going to be able to hold up as a pure wide receiver. The part of his game that you like is the fact that he's dual threat.
He's also a yak guy, which obviously works because he's in Shanahan's system. He gets the ball in space a lot. If he goes to, all right, the Jets actually make sense from a scheme point of view, because if he goes to the Jets, it's the same scheme broadly, in the same way that Miami will link with him, and that makes sense because that's the same scheme as well. But I don't think he can go somewhere, be a pure wide receiver and be one of the top players in the game. I think if he stays at the 49ers, he can be one of the top players in the game, but playing that role that Shanahan has basically divided.
He's in the best situation he can be in. And the truth is, like I said to you yesterday, John, you're not going to franchise tag him because he gets the average of the top 5 salaries, which in a minute, as I worked out yesterday for you, means he'll get 1 year, fully guaranteed, $25.5 million.
Yeah. I mean, Gaz is right. He's put in the chat, anybody getting Deebo is getting him because he's a double threat, but he's saying he doesn't want to, well, the story is he doesn't want to do that. So that's got to present a problem from the off, hasn't it? I think there's probably more to this story than he's letting on.
Do you know what I would do, John, if I was you?
Go on.
If I was you, and this is a bold move, I'd speak to Atlanta. I'd take Riley, who's banned for a season, and their second, or one of their seconds, and give them Deebo Samuel. They get a player who can play now and who can fill a few roles for them. You get a player in Riley next year when he's back off his ban, but you get that extra second.
Be interesting.
And then you go get Tony for a third. And you go into the season with Kadarius Toney and Brandon Ayuk. You have 2 picks in the second. And then next year, you go into the season with Riley, Kadarius Toney, and Ayuk.
It's an interesting thought. I haven't seen anyone come up with that one, so it's definitely a new one. I think the
I'm
thing
playing
I would
checkers when everybody else is playing fucking chess, mate. That's why.
The thing I would say is, if we do trade him, we need another plan because we've nothing at receiver. We've got Brandon Ayuk, we've got Juwan Jennings, who played very well last year, but he's a slot receiver. We've got nothing else. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. Look at that 49ers receiver depth chart. It's the witness protection program. Even I haven't heard of these players, and they play for my team. So if Debo's going, we better have a plan B. And that's why I think we're hearing from what we heard from John Lynch yesterday was, oh, we're not going to trade him. You don't trade a player like Debo Samuel. I think what that means is we're not going to trade him unless we get a shit ton back. And is a team actually going to do that? You and I have talked about this.
Here's one for you, right? Don't trade him. He can't hold out because he'll get fined and he doesn't get paid. Like, he can't hold out anymore under the collective bargaining agreement. Don't trade him. Keep him. Let him see out his rookie deal. Let him go next year and you'll get a high compensatory pick for him anyway.
I do wonder if that's in the thought process because the chances are if he goes for a big contract, which I think he probably will, we're going to get a third.
You're going to get a third for him anyway. And you might as well let him see out his deal, get the third. You know what I mean? Because you're not. Look, I'm not paying. I'm not paying a first rounder for Debo Samuel. I'm just not. Even if he agreed to be a wide receiver and a running back, I'm still not paying it. You're talking about a guy who's had 1 good season in 3. You know what I mean, John? I know that you absolutely fucking spunk trough over.
No, I'm gonna play. I played it straight because we talked about this last week, didn't we? I like him on the 49ers. I think he's a great player. Do I think he's a great player that you should be giving up a top 10 pick? No, he's not fucking. You know,
is he fuck?
You know,
Devontae Adams wasn't even worth a top 10 pick. He's been the best wide receiver for the last 4 years. You know what I mean? And like, he went for a number 22 and a number 54, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you add them 2 together, it's still not worth a top 10 pick. You know what I mean, mate?
But I also think they're not going to let him go unless it's a first rounder. And based on what you said, and yeah, you're right. 1 good season in 3. I think that's fair enough. I thought he had a good rookie season, to be fair, but it was his rookie season. He wasn't pulling up.
People know about it, jumped on and went to Kansas City Chiefs still trade for him. And I'm like, they wouldn't pay Tyreek Hill, so why the fuck are they going to pay Debo Samuel?
Yeah, I can't see the logic in that. It's probably one of the few schemes he could go to where he would actually still be somewhat effective, though, because you put him in Reed's system, I think he'd do quite well, but he's not going to do Tyreek Hill well. So,
let's move off Debo because I'm getting a fucking blood pressure. Who else did you say might be a trade piece?
It annoy you a little bit, doesn't it? You'll be asking me who am I to say. Could always let Debo go and get Antonio Brown, and yeah, no, thanks. I'd rather have it.
I'd rather have 8.
Well, you're always going to get an honest answer from me. I think I'd probably stop watching the 49ers.
I have a quick thought. Just while we were
Jamie.
talking about the I've been quiet, just listening to you all. I was going to jump in earlier. Obviously, you know how much I love this man right here.
Yeah.
Kyle Trask. If he was in this quarterback class, would he have been first?
No.
Fair enough, just a question.
Sorry, Jamie, no.
I mean, you were talking about, like, most of them aren't really that, like, sexy, shall we say. But like I said, Kyle Trask was a Heisman Trophy nominee, most touchdowns in the season.
Still no.
But still no.
Yeah, look, Kyle Trask's not a bad quarterback. I'm not having a knock on him. He wouldn't be higher because he hasn't got the intangibles, Jamie. You know what I mean? Or he hasn't got... For me, Kyle Trask is going to be a very, very good NFL backup quarterback. I think he'll
be like a Marcus Mariota.
I think he'll be a pinch starter, You know, it'd be one of them where if you have to start him for a few games, you're not going to be worried about him. He might play 4 games and go 2-2, for example. But I don't think he's ever going to be an NFL starter, like a consensus starter. I think he's going to be a good pinch quarterback, though. He's going to be one of those he's going to be one of the better backups, and he's going to be a good bridge quarterback at some point. You might well start Fuse Boys at some point when Tom Brady retires eventually in like 2040. But you know what I mean? But I think he'll only ever be a bridge, Jamie. I think you'll always, if you've got Kyle Trask, you're always going to be looking for the next guy, is what I'm saying.
I mean, there was rumours that we were looking at a quarterback later on in the draft this year, so...
I'm not knocking the guy. He's a decent quarterback. I just think he's going to be a backup, but hey, backups are sought after.
I mean, I'm going to clip this, so in 3 years when he wins the Super Bowl MVP, and then we come back to it all.
I'll tell you what we'll do, right? We'll give it a couple of minutes just to see if anybody's watching, first of all. But Jamie, you can ask as well, and John, you can ask as well. Why don't I just have a couple of minutes of people asking who do we think the best player is for their team in the range where their team's picking?
Oh, that's an interesting one.
So you talk about like Tampa, for example, like who would they pick?
Yeah, like for example, Tampa Bay are picking 27th. Yeah, like who would be a good fit for Tampa Bay?
I mean, there's one person that I want, but I think he's going to be in round 2. Much like I said, Kyle Trask was going to be our pick, and we did pick him. I went a little bit too excited and obviously picked him over Tryon. But I think we're going to take Damian Pierce in the second, another Florida Gator. We've got Leonard Fournette, Rojo's gone. We need that other running back to back him up. Damian Pierce in the second, maybe even third. But
I think a good pick.
He doesn't even want to give it.
If he's there, would be Devon Wyatt. I think Wyatt is a really good.
Sorry, give us that name again, because I think we lost you mid-sentence.
Wyatt. Devontae Wyatt.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Why?
Yeah. After accelerating his blood pressure, we've completely broken him now. Just by
why Wyatt?
Yeah, Wyatt.
Yeah, we can hear you.
My computer's old, so it went glitchy. But yeah, I think
Wyatt?
Wyatt's on the board. He's a very good pick for you and a very good fit. You've got Vita Vea, who's your 1 tech. You put Wyatt in as your 3 tech. You know what I mean? And I think you keep that defensive line and that interior pass rush good. I think you have it good. So if he's there, I think Wyatt is a perfect fit for what Tampa Bay want to do.
JP?
I'm going to throw the question back at you here, I think, Mark, because we don't pick till very late on day 2. Where is the need for the 49ers? We've a lot of holes on the team. I can't make that sound any way other than it is. We've not much depth at receiver. We've still not much depth at corner. We've got issues on the O-line. Where would you go with our pick?
What number pick are you?
I'm just trying to discover that because I can't bloody remember.
He is number 62 or something like that.
The actual number was 61. 61.
Right, let's have a look at your depth chart.
Well, there isn't much of it at the moment.
Where you are slated to pick number 61. Right, where you're lying back as I like, Alshire and Warner, and that's quite a deep class. Drew Greenlaw. You kind of bagged the corner on Chardavius Ward, who I thought he was a really good pickup, John. You'll remember I was saying he was
dead happy with
I would have preferred Chardavius Ward over JC Jackson, for example, for the money you got him for. I think you just need to find a centre, because I think that Alex Mack is pretty old. There's a guy called Cam Jurgens coming out of Nebraska. I think he would be a really good pickup for you in round 2.
Interesting. I've seen us mocked with Dylan Parham from Memphis, who's also a centre. I think he might be a bit too unathletic to play centre in our offense, to be honest. But yeah, Jurgens is an interesting one. I don't think you'd ever complain about getting an O-lineman out of a team like Nebraska. I can't really see us going any other way other than O-line, maybe corner. But as you say, signing Ward has probably helped that a little bit. We could go receiver if we think this Debo thing is terminal. I don't know. To be honest, knowing us, we'll probably take a fucking running back or something. We're not predictable in the draft a lot of the time. I would like to see us go O-line. We've nothing at guard or centre right now. We need to get something from somewhere.
I like Cam Jurgens. He was a 3-year starter at Nebraska. He's decent in run, and he was. And the important thing is this, John. He's very good at moving. He can play the outside zone that you want to play and stuff.
Well, that would be important. Yeah, definitely.
I think Tyler Linderbaum's going to be long gone by the 60s.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
I think Jurgens is a good pickup for you guys in 61. If he's there, that's my fit for you, Cam Jurgens. Somebody give us another one. Miami at 102. Miami at 102. I'm going to have a look at your depth chart. I'm cheating because obviously I don't know all your depth charts. Miami depth chart. Give us 2 seconds whilst I just load it up on my laptop. Let's hope that no pop-ups play and the video plays at the same frigging time.
Right then. Those cookies.
Right, yeah, Miami desperately need a linebacker. Let's have a think of their system. Right, who can I think's going to fit in there? Right, I've got one. 102. You want a linebacker? You want somebody who's fast, who can cover sideline to sideline, who's a bit of an athlete. Brandon Smith from Penn State. I like him in that 102 range. He comes from Penn State and he's a Penn State linebacker. And when we think of Micah Parsons last year, I'm not going to say he's going to have the same impact, but he's another one who's an athletic freak. Penn State linebacker. Brandon Smith. I'm going to say him. I'm going to say Brandon Smith.
So let's talk Raiders then. Where do you pick? Because you've traded your first rounder away. Right. Who's the fit for the Raiders? Where should they be going? Well, let's ask 2 questions. What should they be doing and what do you think they'll do? Because there seems to be a disconnect between one and the other usually when it comes to you and the Raiders.
Well, I think our biggest holes going into the draft, and I think that we're sneaky good, by the way. I think we've got a good roster this year. I think we can challenge for the AFC West. I've put about £70 now on the Raiders to win the AFC West because we're still like miles out. But honestly, I genuinely think we've got a really good team, which has got a few holes now. I think our roster's looking good. But
we're at that point in the off-season, ladies and gentlemen. We're at the Raiders fan point.
I'm thinking, what are our needs? Well, we need a right tackle. We need interior offensive line depth. We need a defensive tackle, but I'm not taking any outside of Wyatt, Jones, Davis, and maybe Phil Darian. So if I was picking 86, I think you can get very, very good interior offensive linemen in the 3rd round. So I'm gonna say pick interior offensive line, either a left guard or a right guard. I don't care. But pick an interior offensive lineman. And you've got my names. I said them earlier on. I think my number 1 choice at this moment in time would be Cole Strange from Chattanooga, who can play left guard and is really strong and really well tested. If Cole Strange is there, he's my pick. If he's not there, I'll be perfectly happy getting Zach Tom. We've also got a need at linebacker. So I would take any of Leo Chanel, Chad Muma, Troy Anderson. If any of them 3 are there, I'd take them, but I don't think any of them will be.
As a Raiders fan, are you feeling better not having a first-round pick this year?
Yeah. Given the history of our first one. Although this current team like of front office people, it seems like the circus is no longer around. You know what I mean? Like Ziegler looks to be very good so far. He's made some tremendous moves. I like everything he's done, to be honest with you. I like the way how he got rid of, a player who wasn't going to fit the system in Ngakwe, and got in Yassin, and also already lined up Chandler Jones, who did fit the system. I like the trade for Devontae Adams. I like the signings of the depth pieces, like Anthony Averett and Kyler Fackrell, Dwayne Harmon. I like what he's building. I like what he's building. We're deeper this year. We're deeper.
Let's just touch on Devontae Adams for a second, because I kind of want you to say this on a podcast, because I thought it was a very good theory. Now, we were talking about... sorry, Mark, your blood pressure's going to go up again. When we were talking about Debo last week, you were talking about how you judge a receiver's importance to an offense. And it was a way that nobody's ever really described it to me before. And I kind of want to just bring it out on this pod because I thought it was interesting. So give us the lowdown, and don't mention Debo if it'll hurt your heart or something.
I'd go for the amount of catches they've got for percentage of that offense. So Debo had about 70-odd catches last year. Hunter Renfrow had over 103. Devontae Adams had 128. And Tyreek Hill had about 117 catches last year. Devontae Adams in targets and catches amounted to about 48% of all of Green Bay's passing offense.
But is that not because he's being double teamed and taking all of the other cornerbacks out?
No, that's why it's good, Jamie. Because even though he's being double, triple teamed, he's still half of their entire passing offense. That's how I gauge, quote, like wide receivers. How many catches are they making? What's their catches?
So I know that
how often they're getting open, and it tells us how often that their quarterback is looking for them, which tells us how much that they are a key feature of that team.
So I know that upset a few people in the Raiders group. So if any of them are watching, hello. But I thought it was a really good way of. I thought it was a really good way of sort of trying to quantify that, because it is quite a difficult thing to do. Like we talk about how important certain players are to an offense. There's no real, to my knowledge anyway, there's no real stat that tells you that. So it's an interesting little extrapolation of how you can do it. And there is some truth to it. You start looking at, like I said, there is an issue at the Niners where if Samuel is to leave, then we haven't really got a whole lot else. But we do spread the ball around, so it may not be as dire as it potentially looks.
And
I just wanted to bring that out.
But for example, right, you've got Mike Evans and you've got Chris Godwin at Jamie's team. Who's the more important one to your team? Chris Godwin with 98 catches or Mike Evans with 74?
Yeah, I mean, this is the big argument that we always had on the podcast, though, that Mike Evans didn't catch a lot of balls. But
15 touchdowns.
That's what I mean. Like, he didn't catch a lot of balls because he's not that kind of person to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to throw it to you on the 20-yard line and you're going to run about 50 yards.
But that's the thing.
He's an head zone threat.
Without Chris Godwin and his 98 catches, you're not getting to the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
So who's more important? The guy who's getting you to the red zone or the guy who's getting you in the paint?
But I mean, you discuss that, but then you have the teams that can't do anything in the end zone.
Like the Raiders.
Like you look at some teams that get down to the red zone and they've got like a 30% completion in the red zones.
Like the Raiders.
Exactly. Like it's all well and good doing those long 50-yard drives, but you need that red zone target in there to actually get down the ball.
I'm probably the only person. I can't be the only person in the world, but I'm one of those like who goes, I look at how many catches they've got. I look at what the makeup of their catch-up is. You know what I mean? For example, Hunter Renfrow got like over 1,000 yards last year and had over 100 catches. To me, that says that he's catching the ball regularly all over the field. You know what I mean? Moving the chains, being used for dump-offs, being used in clutch situations and third down. That's why he's got over 100 catches. And I would say the same of Devontae Adams. 128 catches or 123 or something like that he had, which tells me that he's getting the ball on third downs. He's getting the ball when it's like, you know what I mean? And when it's in the red zone, they're looking at him all over the place when they need a first down. And that's how I rate it. It's just my logical sense. Nobody else probably makes sense of it, but in my little world, catches are important. The number of catches you grab.
Gaz in the chat, well, he's made 2 comments. I'll read one out and then we'll answer the question on the other. Next time you think of betting on the Raiders to win your division, just give me the money instead.
I really fancy the Raiders this year. Really fancy them.
Which has got Wes Dennis on Family Fortunes vibes, as far as I'm concerned. If they're up there, I'll give you the money myself. But
Chiefs a weekend. You know, they've lost Hill. They've lost some key pieces on that defense. You know what I mean? The Chargers are a good team. I'll give them that. But Brandon Staley, do I trust him as a coach to lead somebody to a championship? Then you've got the Broncos, who have just got Russell Wilson. But they had to part with a lot of capital to get him. They've lost Von Miller, who's playing pass rush now, opposite Chubb. You know, they've lost a few corners as a result of having to get Russell Wilson's cabinet. So whilst they were a quarterback away last year, they're not a quarterback away this year. They need some pieces. And I think the Raiders are really well-rounded. I think you've got a quarterback in Carr who's been brilliant the last 2 seasons. I think you've got the best wide receiver in the NFL, who's also his college buddy. You know what I mean? No? You've got Darren Waller, you've got Hunter Renfrow, you've got Josh Jacobs. That offense is good. You've got an offensive line which is patchy, but it was still good enough to get us to the playoffs last year. And a lot of them were young players who have played 17 games now. So they're going to improve. Defensively, we've got 3 decent corners. You know, we've got Chandler Jones and Max Crosby, which is going to be one of the best pass rushing tandems in the league. You know, genuinely, I think the Raiders are going to win the AFC West.
I hope you've got the clip machine ready, Jamie. I get where you're coming from. It'll be interesting to see. The big variable for me at Vegas is Josh McDaniels. We have no idea what he's going to be like.
John, you know how I boil down American football. Throw the ball, catch the ball, block, make sure that the throw is possible, stop the catch, get to the passer, right? Throw the ball, Derek Carr, he can throw it. Catch the ball, Devontae Adams, he can catch it. Protect the thrower, Colton Miller, he can. Stop the pass, we've got depth at quarterback, they can do that. Get the quarterback, Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. We've got players at the important positions.
I'm intrigued to see what happens. That's as far as I'll go, because I don't know what to make of McDaniels. That's my biggest thing going into the season. He's great at running an offense, but he's been a head coach once. He was crap. It was a long time ago, because I know that's what every Raiders fan says. If Adolf Hitler had walked into the Raiders as head coach, be like, well, give him a chance, you know.
Fucking hell, John. I can't easy there. Maybe Mussolini, but I'm not too sure I would hit
Mussolini. Alexi Sale dressed as Mussolini.
Of all the dictators, if we're playing fantasy dictator Rangers head coach, I'm thinking Mussolini, you know what I mean? Hitler's a bit fucking strong, John, you know what I mean?
I'm just saying, you're all about. I mean, as a franchise, you've always been the second chance franchise. So McDaniels makes sense, you know. That's all I'm saying.
Honestly, I seriously think that. Have you seen the odds on the Raiders at the moment?
I haven't actually. No,
the Raiders aren't even odds on to go over 8 wins. We had 10 wins last year, and we didn't have Devontae Adams, and we lost our head coach. And our bloody wide receiver killed someone.
Actually, I'd like to revise my previous statement. You already had a right-wing nutcase as your head coach. That's what you had to sack him for.
I genuinely think that. And the bookies have us as the 4 favourites to win the AFC. And I've put 70 quid on. And I think a tenner wins year. Something, it's 7.5 to 1. It's 7.5 to 1 for the Raiders to win the AFC West. That's fucking to me. Stick a tenner on that. You'll get 85 quid back.
Oh, well, I think we have a lot of things in that last 10 minutes that we could probably clip. So Jamie will be busy.
No doubt.
I've completely forgotten what I was after
We've
my.
been on your fucking ages, so we might as well wrap it up.
I can't remember.
I mean, I will say, hopefully, we will be back after the draft to do our annual. I say annual, we've only done it once, to do our divisional breakdowns of who's going to win a division. And I'm sure we're going to get plenty of clips of
Yes.
Mark then saying how much the Raiders are going to win.
I was having a look the other day and I found 3 bets that I liked for division winners. One was the Raiders, who were like 7.5 to 1. I'm like, I'm all over that. Then the next one was the Baltimore Ravens, who were the 3rd favourite to win their division behind the Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals. But they had a lot of injury problems and they're not a bad team, and they've got an MVP, a quarterback. So Baltimore Ravens were 3rd favourite to win the AFC North. And then the other one was the Eagles, because I just don't think the Cowboys are as good as what everybody makes out. And I think they were 2nd favourite to win the NFC East. And I think I went, if I was going to have a little punt, I'd have a little punt on that treble. You know what I mean?
We'll see how Mystic Geordie comes in.
I mean, it's a long way off yet, but yeah, I was just thinking, I love the Raiders at 7.5 to 1 to win their conference.
But I think what we're going to see is this weekend, or rather what's left of this week, is going to have some impact. We talked about the Chiefs missing some pieces. They have a chance, they're going to have to make some moves.
Yeah, the draft's going to make a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think, there's some plenty of storylines to follow. If we're still on YouTube after my reference 5 minutes ago, maybe you'll get to see us again. But I think we've had a good one.
Yeah, well, I think we just go Twitch exclusive now. Hopefully we can jump on is it JP Comedy? Is that what you call on Twitch? We'll just jump on there. We'll jump on there. We've been banned now, 3rd and short. Sorry.
No, I've really enjoyed this. We've covered shitloads of topics. It's been random as ever. But I think we've given some good names for people to look out for.
Yeah. Well, that wraps us up very much nicely. I don't know when you'll see us again. We'll just put something on Twitter and Facebook, and then we'll just turn up as we always do, unplanned, and still chatting for about 1 hour and 40 minutes. Thank you very much, guys.
Cheers, guys.